In this video, I'm going to be walking through a pretty simple way to set up your very own AI chatbot that is going to interface with a custom database with information pertaining to your specific company. And this chatbot could be used to communicate with customers. It could be used to train people getting onboarded. It could be used for whichever purpose you want. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. The first thing you're going to do to get started is go to voiceflow.com and sign up and create an account. There should be a link below in the description where you can go ahead and sign up for free. But once you're in and you've made your account, it's going to take you to this screen where you set up your first agent. So for my agent, I'm going to call it Donahue Real Estate Bot. And then we'll go ahead and get started. You can import a web page if you have one for your business. For this example, I'm doing an imaginary business that doesn't exist. So we'll go ahead and skip, and then I'll upload a knowledge base that I created. It was asking for a website to use as the data source. The data source is basically where your model is going to get its information from. It's AI powered, so ChatGPT is going to determine how to parse your data source and the most efficient way to get data out that for questions that it can't answer, but it obviously doesn't know everything about your company. It wasn't trained on your company. So you need to upload a file so that it has all the information it needs access to. So I went ahead and put together an example knowledge base in Google Docs. But like I mentioned before, you could just do that. You could just add your website URL as a data source. It's up to you. Let's see. Should be O'Donoghue. So here it is. I'm going to upload my knowledge base and then I'm going to import it. So basically what I just did is I uploaded a data source. So Voiceflow is going to take this data source and then it's going to create what it calls chunks out of it, which means it takes the most relevant information that it will need to access in order to answer questions, and it'll store that as what's called a chunk. And you can upload, there's a limited amount depending on which plan you have, but you can upload hundreds before you even hit the paid plan. So this would be hundreds of pages, hundreds of different documents, and then they'll all be parsed by AI to create chunks that the bot will use when it's trying to answer queries. So that is the knowledge base. Should have a pretty good understanding of that now. These are workflows. So workflows is basically the logic behind the chat. So right here we have a home and this is a start. So as soon as you open the chatbot, you're interacting with this primary workflow. So if you see this play button at the bottom of the screen, this is the chat. But basically, at this part where you see this, hi there, I'm your new AI agent, ask a question, and I'll use the knowledge you provided to respond. This is the home workflow that we're interacting with. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. Or let's go ahead and edit workflow. All right, as you can see, there's some material to guide you if you're new. But basically, what this particular workflow is doing is it has this, I believe they call these cards. Not exactly sure, but whatever they call this little structure right here, this set AI agent persona is basically, I believe it's setting the AI. You can either set a variable or set AI. Okay, set AI has 3 dots, so it's setting a variable. So it's setting the AI persona, it's setting a variable called agent persona to this particular value. You are a helpful AI chatbot for a business. So this message is basically what you're going to display in the chatbot as a message from the AI chatbot. So it's pretty simple. This is like a hard-coded message, no AI or anything, just hi, I'm your new AI agent. And then another message, ask a question, and I'll use the knowledge base you provided to respond. And then listen for an intent. This is where the magic happens. This is going to determine which workflow is going to redirect this to. This is just like the intro workflow, the home workflow. But if it's going to listen for an intent, and if that intent is book a demo, then it's going to trigger this workflow. Now, this thing right here, we're in a new workflow. I'm blocking it. Let me see if I can minimize my screen real quick. Okay, so this dark gray button that says book a demo, this is an intent trigger. So it's basically using AI to determine an intent based on the response that the chatbot got from the actual user. So yeah, this was a book a demo. And right now we haven't implemented this workflow yet. So if we were to do that, it would just display this workflow hasn't been built yet. Ask a question and I'll use the knowledge you provided to respond. And then it's going to redirect you to listen for another intent. So let me go ahead and give an example. All right, so we get these first messages that are programmed here in the home flow. If I say I want to book a demo, is listening for an intent. So when I submit, this step of the card is being triggered, and bam, it redirects me to the book a demo workflow. And in the book a demo workflow, we have this workflow hasn't been built yet. As we see, we get that on the screen. And then the next message, ask a question, and I'll use the knowledge base you provided to respond. And is once again listening for an intent. Now I'll demonstrate the knowledge base response. This is basically, once again, there's another trigger in here, and there's some more information in case you need some extra guidance or some extra information on implementing it. But basically, this knowledge base workflow is going to be the main workflow for your chatbot. This is where a lot of the functionality that you expect from a chatbot is going to come from it using the knowledge base to answer your customers and potential customers' queries. Inside of the knowledge base, it has some pre-built out steps in this particular one. You could obviously change it. If you don't want any of this, you could delete this, but we'll keep it in because this is a pretty good starting base for what you're trying to do. So basically, what this is doing, this is using AI to basically optimize what the question that the user is asking in order to get the best response from the knowledge base. So it's optimizing the question for knowledge base search. So there's a very long and detailed, but also well-tested prompt that gets good results for this thing. So it's analyzing the user's last response in the conversation history to identify a core topic, intent, or information needed, craft a question that's highly specific and detailed, targeting exact information. So a whole bunch of instructions that are going to get out a good query. After it gets out this optimized query to search the knowledge base, it's going to implement this step. You can do this manually. It's basically calling an API, and the API is going to return the chunks that I mentioned before, which is the relevant data from each specific URL or article that you uploaded. It's going to return a certain amount of chunks. Basically, what it's doing is once it gets that question, it searches through the chunks and it uses AI to create what are called vector scores. So it's ranking how similar the information in each chunk is to the query to determine whether it should use those particular chunks, because it doesn't want to search the entire knowledge base. That would take an extremely long time and use up a lot of credits as far as OpenAI or whichever model you're using to perform the search. So it's basically taking a shortcut by figuring out what the user is asking and figuring out which pieces of the knowledge base are the most similar. And these pieces, as I mentioned before, are called chunks. So it's basically going to determine the similarity of the question to all the different chunks. And then it's going to find the top most similar chunks and return those. So I believe somewhere in here, there's somewhere where you can choose exactly how many chunks you want to use. Okay, so that's chunk limit. The camera's blocking what I can see, but this chunk limit basically determines how many chunks it's going to select based on the similarity score. Right now it's on 4, so it's going to select the 4 most similar chunks based on the similarity score. We could do 2, so then it would only select 2 chunks based on the similarity score. Depending on the question, this could be fine, but you might need more context for more chunks. You can go up to 10, but the more chunks you use, it's going to take more time for it to use all these chunks in order to answer the question. So it's going to slow things down. And it's also going to take more money, more credits, because it's going to require more operations from the AI in order to properly search through all these chunks. If we get a minimum chunk score not met, this basically just means that it checked the similarity score of all the chunks and nothing was close, which typically means that the user asked a question that isn't relevant at all to what the chatbot's intended for. So if I have a real estate, my example of chatbots for a real estate company, but if somebody asks what color is the sky, then I'll get a minimum chunk score not met. And that's where the bot will politely remind them that they're here to answer questions related to the company. Assuming that it's a relevant question, the chunk score should be pretty high. There should be an answer for it somewhere. And this is where we go ahead and get another variable. This is going to be a set AI variable. So it's going to basically set the prompt based on the answer. Let's see what is saying. So it's taking in this last utterance. This is a variable. So if you see anything in these little brackets, these are variables. So this is chunks. This is what it returned. Let's see if we click on this. So we have this optimized question that we got from the previous one. This is in those brackets, and we're saving this to a variable called chunks. And then when we go to craft the user response, we can see the chunks is being referenced as a variable and the input data along with the last utterance. This last utterance is basically just saving the question that the user asked. This VF memory is basically, like it says right here, the conversation history, and then there's also a function to determine the language of the user. But we're not going to get too much into this more advanced. We're just assuming for the most part that most of your users will probably speak English, since you speak English because you're watching this video. But yeah, so this is crafting the response to the user. This is prompting what we're going to say back based on extracting the data from the chunks of relevant data from the knowledge base. Once again, this talk is going to use Markdown. That's just for visual purposes. It's going to verify that the response is actually coming from your knowledge base and the AI just isn't making stuff up and passing it along to the user. And then it's going to apply to this KB response. So it's called set AI because it uses a prompt in order to get an AI response, and then it sets a variable based on this AI response. And this variable is KB response. And then lastly, we have a message. If you remember, that's from this talk thing. This is what's going to be displayed in the chat. And yeah, after it displays this chat, it's going to be awaiting the next question, which is listening for an intent. So let me go ahead and demonstrate. Okay, so we've been greeted by the bot. Let me just say, what are the services that you guys provide? Listening for an intent. It's probably identified it. Okay, it identified it as a knowledge base question, directed me to knowledge base. And then I'm not sure if you can see, but basically in real time, it was highlighting each step as it walked through all of the steps, from optimizing the question to searching the knowledge base to creating a response to actually responding. And over here, we have the response. Basically, it's saying that you can buy a house with us. We can help you sell your house. We can help you with new construction. We can help you with luxury real estate, relocations, services, or commercial real estate. And over here, this is coming from what we actually do: buying, selling, new construction, luxury, relocation, and commercial. So it did not just make it up. This is really coming from the knowledge base. And over here, we can see the specific query. So this is not what I asked. I asked, what are the services you guys provide? When it optimized the question, this is how it decided to write the query out. What specific services are offered by your company for users, including details on the key features, capabilities, any limitations, exclusions within the different user service plans. Additionally, how do these user-focused services integrate and function with your overall platform offering? So as you can see, it's very optimized compared to what I entered in order to get the best results from the database. Really, I have one file, so that's one chunk, so it didn't really have to do too much searching. Oh, okay, so I have one file, but I guess files produce multiple chunks. So it retrieved 2 chunks. There was a limit of 4. So that probably means there were only 2 chunks created by my document, and it just retrieved both chunks. But if you have a more extensive knowledge base, then it'll retrieve the 4 most relevant chunks, or however many most relevant you decide to set. Went ahead, crafted a response based on the question and the chunks that it retrieved, and then it went ahead and spit out this answer. Just understanding these basic workflows and how the whole knowledge-based response works is basically everything you really need in order to set up a simple chatbot that can work with the basic knowledge base and just answer simple questions that are already available on your website, but that the user might not be interested in looking for themselves. Now, this is only the surface as far as what you can do with Voiceflow. So really quickly, I'm going to implement another workflow, showing you like what it would be like to build one out. For this particular workflow, we're going to be capturing a lead who's interested in selling their property. So the first thing we're going to do is create a new intent, and we're going to call this interested in selling. And the user is interested in listing a property. And these utterances are basically just samples of any possible response somebody who's interested in selling might say. So they might say just straight up, I'm interested in selling. They might say, I'd like to sell my home. They might say, I'd like to sell my property. I just say, I want to sell. And we can just generate anything, a bunch of other possible statements that they might type in. I'd like to sell my home. I'm interested in selling. I'd like to sell my property. I want to sell. Exploring the idea of selling. So basically, anything that somebody with the intention of selling might say. So now we have another intent. And the next thing is to go to workflows and create a new workflow called interested in selling. Description: a user is interested in listing a property. So we have a new workflow for triggers. We're going to click interested in selling. So whenever they're in the home and they answer that first message with anything remotely resembling them being interested in selling, they'll be redirected over to this workflow. And the first thing we will be doing is basically letting them know that we can help them, but we will need some information. Let's see. Requesting information. Let's just say explaining information request. So we dragged in a message. This is just a basic little script that the bot is going to say to anybody who gets into this flow. So we're going to say, we'd love to help you list your property. We just need a little more information in order to get started. And then they might end up on the flow twice, so it's just good to generate some variants. We're eager to assist you with listing your property. We just require additional details to begin. And then I mean to do that. Okay, and then we'll generate one more. Okay. So now we have 3 different variants. So if they somehow end up on this flow multiple times, they're not just going to see the same copy and paste message over and over again. So we'll have that. This is explaining that we're going to need some more information from them. And the first thing we're going to ask is, what's your name? All right, so ask them for their name, and then we're going to capture their response. Important, you go to capture entire user reply, and we're going to save this to a variable called lead name that we're going to use later. Okay, so I was already making this flow earlier just to make sure I could walk through it efficiently. So I already created this variable, but if you haven't, then you'll just type that in and hit create variable. And then you'll select lead name, and we're going to save the entire reply to lead name. So boom, we got the first piece of information we need. The next piece, once again, another message. I'm going to call this ask for email. This message is going to be, what's your email? Once again, we are going to capture their response. And once again, we're going to save it to a variable called lead email. If you don't have that variable created, you need to create it. And then from this little card, we're going to go on to the next step, which is another message. For this message, we're going to say, ask for property address. Say, what's the property address? And as you've probably guessed, we need to capture this response and save it to lead property address. Create that variable if you don't have it. And the final thing that I'm going to showcase is basically where we're going to use, first we're going to have a message explaining it. So we're going to say, what type of property? Oh, this is the title of the block. So we're just going to say, we're going to say ask property type. The message is going to be, what type of property are you listing? Question mark. And what we're going to do is this time we're going to use buttons. So we have house. We have, let's just say townhome, condo, and then let's say apartment. Let's see. And we don't need this last thing. Okay. So now this is the final message, and it's going to give them a list of things to select. But regardless of what they select, it'll change the data, but this next step will be the same across all of them, and it's going to be an API call. We're going to give this information to make.com so that make.com can upload a Google Sheet. So let's go ahead and head over to Make. All right, so we are inside of Make. The first thing we're going to do is click a webhook. It's going to be a custom webhook. And we'll call this real estate lead submission. Boom. And then we want to copy this address to the clipboard, and we're going to hit post. Now, if you don't know what this is, basically just a webhook is communication between two different applications. So in this case, it's Voiceflow communicating with Make.com, letting them know that somebody has just submitted information as a lead and is going to transfer that information over. This post it's a function if you're familiar with coding, but it's the way we're sending, it's the method that we're sending the data. You don't have to understand that too much. But do need to know that the way we send the data is this thing called a JSON, which basically means it has to be in these brackets, and there is a key and an object, and both of them have to have these quotations. So the first piece of data is just gonna say name, but we're getting this name from the lead name variable that we already captured. And then it's important to put a comma between all the different lines in this JSON object, which is what this whole thing is called. So we have the name, we have email. Again, we're going to put that in quotations, and we're going to reference this lead email variable that we captured in the second step. And then we're going to do the same thing for address. We'll go ahead and call it property address. Oops, I messed up. That's supposed to be a quotation. Okay, so property address. Once again, more quotations. And lead property address that we've already captured. And then one more thing, make sure you include this comma. And then the last thing is going to be property type. And we're going to go ahead and autofill it. This is the path from house. So we're going to go ahead and fill in the property type as house. And that should be all that we need to do. Let's go ahead and test this flow out. Make sure that we're sending the webhook properly. When you initialize this in Make, it's going to have this, it's just going to show this little screen that shows, and the reason the circle is just going is just waiting for data in order to see what type of structure you're going to send over. We're going to run this flow really quickly and make sure it's working properly. So it just took us to the main screen, but we're gonna say, I'd like to sell my home. All right, so it predicted the intent is interested in selling, and boom, hit me with the we're ready to help you with listing your property. We just need some more info to get going. What's your name? Go ahead, give them my name. What's your email? Let's just say xavier@gmail.com. And what's the property address? 123 Main Street. And then as showing me these different options, we only have house built out. So house and API call successfully triggered. So as you can see, there's no more loading circle. We've successfully determined the data structure, and we've got that. So the next thing we're going to do, can't really see it, but we're going to go ahead and parse JSON. So just search that up in Make, and the string is going to be this value that comes in from the webhook, which is the thing that this is the value. So it's going to parse this. It's going to get a name, email, property address, and property type. And then after we've parsed that, we're going to go ahead and go to Google Sheets. And we're going to add a row. Now I went ahead and made this tab. Let's see, it's showing up weird on my monitor. But we have a name, email, property address, and let me go ahead and add property type. Okay, so got name, email, property address, and property type. And the file is called real estate leads. So we need to find that in Google. We can go ahead and search real estate leads, and boom, we found it. There's only one sheet. Name, so we can't see everything yet. So I need to run this again so that we can see how the can see how the data is formatted. But for now, I'll just, let's see. It might give me an error if I just try to keep this blank, because I don't want to put it's gonna run, but it might not let me run if I don't. It might say the module is unfinished or something. Let's see. Okay, so once again, we're going to run through this bot. Say, to sell my home. All right, so let's just say Xavier x@gmail.com. 3 Main Street house. All right, so it got a value, parsed this value, and it got a name, email, and okay. Oh, so there's, as you can see, we don't have the actual 123 Main Street that I typed in because I typed in the variable I stored it in wrong. There's a typo. So there's 2 E's in this property address, so it didn't turn out right. And then I didn't finish the Google Sheet, so let me go ahead and fix this little typo. Property address. Okay, so that's good. Now let's go ahead and finish this out. Now that we have an example, we just drag in name in here, email in here, property address in here, property type in here, and boom, we're all set up. So let's go ahead and run it one more time and make sure. Before I do that, I'll go ahead and fit it. So we have a different, it's basically doing the same thing, but depending on the property type, that's going to affect the data. In this case, it's a townhome. In this case, it's a condo. In this case, it's an apartment. Now we have the entire flow finished out, and they're all communicating with make.com. So let's go ahead and run it once more. So go back. It might have, uploaded some blank things when I was running it, but it should upload some real data this time. So let's go ahead and run the bot again. Let's see. Like to sell my name, Xavier O'Donoghue. My email, xavier@gmail.com. 3 Main Street. And let's say we're selling a condo. All right, we call this. There should definitely be a final message confirming that we got their information and we'll be in touch shortly. But let's see if this worked properly. All right, so as you can see, this Google Sheets has been populated correctly. We've captured the email, the name, the address, and the type from our Voiceflow bot all the way into our Google Sheets with a simple animation. And then we'll go ahead and finish out this flow. In the case of an error, let's go ahead and save. Let's see. In the case of an error, just have a message. We're gonna say, sorry, something wrong. Please enter your original concern and try again. And in this case, we're going to do a button, but we're just listening for a trigger. And we're going to go ahead and name this block error. So in the case that we're unable to capture it, we're going to send things over here. And in the case that we are successful, we're going to go ahead and send a message, and we're going to say, great, we'll be in contact shortly. And then another message saying, is there anything else I can help you with today? And once again, going to go ahead, drag a button over here, and it's listen for a trigger. So they might want to sell a property, and then they might have another question from the knowledge base, and the bot will handle that accordingly. A very simple flow, but this is basically how you would set something up like this. And now that it's completely finished, let me run through it one more time. Let's see. I like to sell my home. I didn't mention this before, but basically it's logging everything that's happening so that if something were to go wrong, you could debug it by looking at exactly what's happening. So it's just letting you know everything that's going on. This time we're gonna say John Smith. This time is john@gmail.com. This is my next door neighbor at 124 Main Street. Say he's interested in selling an apartment. All right, so it went ahead, got in contact with the Make API, and once again, it's taking me back here. So I might have a question. I might say, I'm also interested in learning more about O'Donoghue real estate. And that should take me to the knowledge base. Let's see. Yep. And boom. So as you can see, this fluid chatbot is maneuvering through the workflows based on what the user needs. If we go over here, let's see. There was something wrong with the last web. Okay. I didn't have the make on. I didn't have the make automation on to catch the webhook when I sent it. So it didn't get updated. But as you can see from the other one, it's a pretty simple flow. And that's how the bot works. You can create whatever workflows you need. You'll use a variety of messages. We didn't use too much AI for this particular workflow. I'll make another tutorial using a more in-depth scenario. But this is basically a basic overview on how to maneuver around Voiceflow, what the different means, what the different workflows do, what intents mean, and basically just how to set up your bot, how to understand knowledge base in chunks. So if you have a bot that you have a more complicated use case and you need help with that, then book a meeting below. There should be a Calendly link. And if you want to see more content on Voiceflow, chatbots, also make automations and other things in the automation and AI field, then make sure to subscribe to the channel for more similar content.